Hi guys, we're still talking about GDP. Um, I just wanted to make sure that I go over one of the concepts that sometimes gets missed by students as they are studying this chapter. The full definition of GDP is the market value of all final goods and services produced in a nation within a specific period of time, right? A lot of this makes sense. We want goods and services, right? A dog walker services are important. A doctor's services are important, not just helicopters and corn and cars, etc. We want to make sure that we specify whether the factory is located in the country or it's an American factory that's located somewhere else. We want to also specify a period of time. This is because production is an ongoing process. It just keeps going on and on and on. So how do we measure it? So we have to kind of artificially put a limit, say 1st of Jan to 31st of December. Whatever was produced within this time period counts as GDP of the previous year, right? All of this kind of makes sense. It's intuitive. The one thing that I wanted to stress is the word final. The idea here is that there are two types of goods. One are goods that are purchased by end users. Those are called final goods. So when you go to a dealership and you buy a car to drive yourself back and forth to school, you're the end user of the car. And the year that you've purchased the car, the value of that car should count towards the GDP of the United States. However, when say budget car rentals buys a car, they are they are the intermediate users of the car because they are using the car to produce another final good service, which is of car rentals. So it's the same product, a car, but when you purchase it, it goes into GDP. And when budget car rentals purchases that car, it does not count as GDP. Hence, intermediate products, goods or services that are purchased by other businesses in order to produce final products are not counted as part of GDP. This is essentially to avoid double counting. That's an interesting phrase here, double counting. So let's go over this concept of double counting. Um, these are, say, the steps in the production of a very simple phone. This is probably from like 10 years ago, or maybe even more than that. Say a very simple non-smartphone, right? And so at the first stage, say this company, say Apple, so called up a business and said, "Hey, we want to buy the outer case and keyboard from you." And they negotiated and they settled at a price of $5 per outer case and keyboard. Right? Then Apple called another company and said, "Look, we want you to do our internal hardware." And so they negotiated on a price of $15 for the internal hardware. Same for operating system. Apple has the operating system, but obviously it costs them to produce it and to maintain it, and have security updates, etc. Say $30 per phone. It costs $79 to connect to a network. And then when you go to Best Buy, you see this phone for $199. So if I ignored the idea of final products and intermediate products, I could just add up the all the parts, right, that went into the phone plus the value of the phone. That's the key over here. Or the value of all the parts one, two, three, four that went into the phone. These parts were produced and sold in America, but then the final phone was also produced and sold in America. And so if I add them up, I get the total GDP because of this phone was $338. The basic problem here is that the $199 retail price of the phone includes the value of parts one, two, three, and 4. That's the main idea, that $338 is double counting the contribution or the value generated by these intermediate parts. And so this column here basically shows you the value addition that happened at each step. Between step 1 and 2, right? The value of $10 was added. Between steps 2 and 3, the value of $15 was added. Between steps 3 and 4, a value of $49 was added. The final phone sold for 120, and if I add it up, I get $199 worth of GDP. So again, GDP is a very clever concept that takes a very hard problem and uses clever solutions to make it into a simple problem. The hard problem is we produce hundreds of thousands types of products, all in different physical units, in gallons, in liters, in thousands of bushels, in etc. etc. These different physical units are not additive. So in fact, we can take a simple example: 6 gallons of apple juice are not additive with 6 gallons of orange juice, because it's literally apples and oranges, right? So the GDP says, you know what? Let's get over this problem by multiplying everything by its price per unit, and that gives us market value. It also specifies, the geographic nature of the production and where it takes place, the period of time in which the production is considered. And then finally, to avoid double counting, it focuses only on final goods and services.